The audio?
So it's 43.
Sweet, why is...
You know, I think it's when I advance to the next one, it actually starts my timer.
Oh. That's really cool.
I think.
Huh.
It was on the first.
Maybe. That's odd.
I think it was like that.
Unless you're afraid to fall asleep in front of our lecture, that would be otherwise. Well, today's lecture is very special. Superbly special because it's by one of us. Before I start, I would suggest you turn yourself into vibration mode or silent mode, or turn it off simply.
Actually, don't turn it off.
Oh.
Just vibrate. I'll tell you what.
In many senses, Kara is one of the models that we're trying to establish and create. She is into models. If you have conversation with her, the word modeling is always come up. The model of practice, the model of scholar, and even model of architectural value. I think she is probably, with the word model, she and her partner Michael have constantly put thoughts in the notion of remodeling. I just quote from them. They've seen architectural practice as open-ended, not in a way that interdisciplined, but multidisciplined. And they've tried to, from all the discourses, arguments, and scenarios of urban life, of material and process, and approach architecture that's more than spatial. Therefore, I think the word of theirs is anti-spatial, or even another word which has a counterpart of it is anti-spatial as well. So anti-spatial and anti-special. That's probably the best characterization of the energy of their practice. She's also into model of scholars, which basically has, with her teaching and research rigor, she's trying to define where actually, if a specialty of a scholar is defined by a boundary, or actually formed by a core. So it's a density of interest and density of discourses that form a core, or is actually a clear boundary specialty that's formed the academic value, which I think that provokes a lot of thoughts even in my head, becoming a dean. And as you know, part of my job is actually to collaborate in many ways with our faculty members, try to define and develop a trajectory in their success at the school. But I also do have some formal introductions, which goes actually as a matter of fact, a lot of them are new to me as well. So I'm going to read it to share with you. She's a graduate of 1996 from MIT with Bachelor of Science and Art and minor as a major, and a minor in urban design and public policy. Received her master's degree from Yale University in 1999. While in school, she has received many awards, including William Chamberlain Prize for the most outstanding undergraduate study at MIT, project at MIT. Gertrude Wood Traveling, sorry for my pronunciation, it's a very special, Gertrude Wood Traveling Scholarship, an AIA Professional Degree Scholarship, the Alka Rokai Gold Medal, and William Parsons Memorial Medal for Excellence in Urban Planning. This list, she was well equipped and charged for great intense experience with Cesar Pally in New Haven. That's right after she got her master's degree. Worked on important projects such as Bloomberg Tower in New York City, street furniture for Buenos Aires, Argentina, and sports complex for the University of Chicago, and most deeply on the Overture Performing Arts Center in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, shortly after that, Kara and Michael formed a very focused, energetic practice called Lattice, which actually was listed as one of the 10 firms to watch by LA Architect magazine. Lattice also won in July a multidisciplinary, which again reflect their principle of practice, International Spark Design Award for Residential Commission, which is called Offer House. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it now. We will have a pleasure to see it. Other work recently published in Interior Design, Step Inside, it's called End Step Inside Design this month. Their work also profiled in LA Weekly and magazines outside the United States, in Korea Times and Korean Magazine. She's probably at a very critical moment where her research, teaching, and practice is coming to a point and create a synergetic and integrated approach to watch. And that's, with this said, let's welcome Kara.
I'd like to thank you, Dean Ma, very much for your introduction. I really appreciate your insight, and I'm going to be going over some of those things myself, but I think you had only said it better. Is this loud enough, do you think? Yeah? Can you hear it? How's that? Can you guys hear it in the back? Yeah, okay, thank you. I've had the pleasure over the last 3 years that I've been here at USC to work and collaborate with a number of you, faculty and students alike. And it's been my extreme pleasure, and I feel very honored to have this opportunity tonight to share with you all what I've been working on for the last couple of years. And I hope it sparks new conversations and new collaborations with you all. But thank you very much for taking the time to be here tonight. I appreciate it, as we are coming across midterms very soon, so I know it's something that you're doing out of thanks. This lecture tonight is entitled Design Convergence, as it ties with my most recent interests and research. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But with regards to this title, I have to mention that, as Dean Ma might have mentioned, I recently actually served as chair of the Lectures and Exhibits Committee for the last 2 years, lining up guests and for these different events. And I have to say, it feels very different now to be on the other side of the podium. And because I'm often usually the one that's hounding other people for their lecture images and for their titles and for whatnot. And if you look on the lecture posters, I have to tell you now, a little insight to what happens. Anyone who doesn't answer our requests or provide information, among things, a lecture title, often gets the infamous lecture title, Recent Work. You'll see there's actually one of those, I think, on our lecture series this term. And I would have to admit that my title was that for a few weeks until I kind of got caught up with things. But upon reading it a few times, I realized that I had to change it immediately because, as being in practice only 3 years now, all that we have done is recent work. So everything I'm going to be showing now is since my last lecture here at USC almost 2 years ago. And I must say that although all of this work is done personally or under my direction, it's really difficult for me to stand up at this podium and to claim that all of this is mine. Because as much as a national ambassador for a country represents his or her country, so do I of Lattice and our work. because none of these things would be possible without a network of other people that I rely upon, and they make possible what I do in life. Because right now in our office, I have to say, we have an amazing group of people, and I'm incredibly proud to work with all of them. Most notably right now, we have Chet Callahan, who's sitting right here, who's actually a graduate of this school. Okay. We have our project designers and all around really cool people, of which Russell Dyken is here, Jennifer Sang. And then there are also all of the interns that we enlist from this school. This year there was third-year student Eric Prinz, who might be out there somewhere. We have the longest running now fourth-year student Greer Burton, who put together this lecture. And also that list over the last few years from USC is Jeff Chin, Julian Mikulski, Emily Eierman, Zoran Pevic, Matthew Paul, Henry Ling, and Ryan Upton. So thank you to all of you. Without you all, I would not be here today. I must acknowledge, and I truly want to acknowledge, my truest collaborator and partner at Lettuce, Michael Chung. Michael and I have been partners in life and our pursuits in design for 10 years this month. And I know that's not an eternity, but compared to all the other hookups that happened in architecture, we're pretty proud of it. And I couldn't think of, honestly, a better partner. I couldn't think of a better partner than Michael. And I can honestly say Lettuce would not be what it is today, nor what it is quickly becoming without him. I think we make a good partnership. So, as Dean Moss said, thank you. I don't actually want you to turn off your cell phones, okay? Please turn the ringers off, and you can have your computers open. But I want to do a little bit of an experiment here for the sake of research. Here's my email address. And my ubiquitous Facebook profile. And I'd like to ask that all of you, through the course of this lecture, send me an email message, send me a text message, or for my Facebook friends, you could post on my wall. And I'd like you to text me questions, comments, arguments during the course of my talk. And we'll see if we can use them for a brief discussion at the end. If not, I'm going to tell you I'm serious. So just know if you do this, that this will be forever part of my research metadata. So watch it. Okay, got it? In a little while, I'm going to be sharing with you my recent research and interests and some of my practices' recent projects. We all wear many hats in this profession, and I'm proud to say that in this arena, I am a teacher, I'm a researcher, I'm a practitioner, and I'm a builder, and I feel very strongly about that. To start off, I'd like to give you some insight, to follow up what Dean Moss said, into myself, and to understand why I'm here at this point in time. I was born in 1974. I am Generation X. I also recently realized that this is so important and it has greatly influenced myself and others in my generation. I was born and grew up literally in the middle of America, in the Midwest, great state of Iowa. And speaking of convergence, we used to always have the joke that being in the middle meant we were able to assimilate the best of both coasts. It just takes about 10 years for it to get to the middle, but it happens. Also being in the Midwest, I grew up in, this is actually Des Moines, the town where I grew up. I have a pointer in the back. It's full of stereotypes of single-family homes, kids playing in the street, suppers on the table at 6 o'clock. But in my entire childhood, there was this very casual influence of technology. I was part of the generation, being of Generation X, it was famously coined by Dennis Copeland in the same title book. We were the first generation that really saw the first growth spurt of the technological wave. We were the first to truly interact and engage a computer in our daily life. And now in our adult lives, we are the first to bear witness, thank you, to the many technological realities that were once promised. I played games, and I actually learned to program on this very first Macintosh. I remember getting our first TV remote. I bet a number of you actually don't remember life without the TV remote, do you? No. We also pester our parents to hook up Pong or record Three's Company on the VCR. Isn't it amazing that that used to be fun? And I never played that fast. But this casual relationship with technology led me to two fascinations in high school that drove me to leave Iowa, leave the Midwest, and make my way to the East. I had an interest in architecture and an interest in computers. That interest in architecture solely came from Frank Lloyd Wright, I have to admit. I found him through the Falling Water Coffee Table book. In Iowa, he was architecture. That was what I had to go out and to investigate in the world. But my interest in computers was found, let me go back one second, through having the resources in front of me in academia to experiment. I was proudly actually the first female to take AP computer programming in high school. Yeah, it was a great group. I love programming, but I actually loved it for very distinct reasons. I'm very analytical, and I'm artistically creative. And I was very interested in how basic code such as this, you could create visual creations. You could create it just literally from basic language. So even if the result was an open equation of like Pac-Man acting like a pixelated object and moving across the screen, you know, just doing this, I was fascinated in that I could make this equal something visual. So where did this lead to? As Dean Moss said, I chose to go to college, my grades were all right, set out rather naively to find a school that had what? Architecture and computers. So I applied, I got into MIT. It's good enough. I got to MIT, and boy, did I find computers. So much so that I almost had culture shock, and I found it all very abnormal. I have to say the culture shock of being around was downright freakish. Because now computers were no longer tools. They weren't methods that were part of my lifestyle. They were now devices that I felt like were taking over our lives as humans. And I needed something more concrete and more literal, not virtual. So I took my first architecture school as a freshman, or architecture studio as a freshman. I pondered my eventual major, and I was really faced with really weird, foul-smelling computer science labs, or the architectural studio, which was certainly weird and smelly in its own way too, but I was hooked to the studio. There was one thing about going to school, though, at MIT. There was a certain passion for technology and for science that was satiated every day. It was a way of life, and it influenced everything and everyone on campus. Couldn't avoid it, even though I had tried when I got there. I actually learned CAD, 3D Studio, an early form of Maya, all within weeks in one course in my junior year. I had my first exposure to the City of Bits, which the lecture by Bill Mitchell, who was Dean of the School of Architecture at the time, in the media lab. He was talking about future technology. He was convinced, and he spoke to all of us as a class, that we wouldn't be reading books in 5 years. And he was so serious. And I was fascinated with this, but I was also in disbelief at the same time. But I was still grappling with what I knew now had to consider normal. So I graduated MIT with an architecture, art, and urban design minor, and I went straight to grad school. I knew I loved school, so I looked for my next academy, and I chose Yale. Why did I choose Yale? It's not because of its esteemed Ivy League institution. It's not because they waitlisted me for an undergrad and I had to get back at them. It's not because I loved beautiful New Haven. It's because Yale School of Architecture was in the dark ages. Look at that building. When I went there was a fascinating group of community there, but in that concrete bunker, there were absolutely no computers, none. There were pigeons. We had to cover our drawings every night because of the pigeon crap that would come down and get onto our desks as we sat on the different trays. But it gave me a chance that I felt to get back to my roots of art, drawing, sketching, drafting, and manual construction and making things. It cleared the clutter of my mind at the time, and I got to have a bit of a liberal arts education, which I so valued. I made it through there in 3 years. I never picked up a mouse for a studio project. And it kind of blows my mind away now, because even with Bob Stern coming in as a dean in my last year, in crept the Ethernet cables along the concrete. One person got their first laptop in studio, and I had the first cell phone in studio. Things changed. By the time I graduated Yale, I'd found my interest, my love in architecture had actually waned. So as I said, as a typical Gen Xer, rather apathetic then, got a little depressed, disillusioned regarding architecture. But it wasn't because of burnout from the intense studio culture. It was once I started to get into the profession, right immediately after Yale, in a qualified way when I went from the academy to the professional world. When I saw the role of the modern architect, I felt cheated. The spirit and the ingenuity, the fervor that I participated in and believed in my studies was hardly recognizable in the face of my colleagues and my elders in the practice. What had happened? I wondered, was it my location? Was it my gender? Was my education? And I decided, no, it was actually the climate that I was in at the time. So what did I decide to do? For Michael and I, we actually decided to leave the US. I flip-flopped back into the love of technology, and Michael and I rode the dot-com wave around the world doing web design. This was in 1999, so it was right at the kind of ascension of everyone thinking that they could either make $1 million or save the world with a new website. So we literally bought this book and got 2 laptops, and we learned everything we thought we needed to know to build websites and support traveling for a year around the world. Again, this is feeding my love for back to architecture, too, for everything that we were able to experience and saw. And early in 2000, the crash did happen, and we had to return back to the States and to technology. The love of architecture, as I said, returned, but still I felt helpless, and I needed empowerment when I was faced with, as I said before, seeing the role of the architect eroding. The simulation of the term of architecture is now being used in other industries. And I feel the Starchitect model is not cutting it. So what did we decide to do? We decided to move to LA. We wanted to get out of the East Coast ivory tower and the boys' clubs, and we had to get to work. So the West Coast for us was the new frontier. We felt like it already had a history of embracing more relevant model of architectural practice with, say, the history of Charles and Ray Eames and the collaborative practice. And upon reaching Los Angeles and practicing for a couple years, I could definitely see that because of all of these technological devices, globalization was becoming more evident here in Los Angeles. And this brings up the concept of convergence. As it was all now evident in my own life with my 2 primary interests, computers and architecture, it was becoming mainstream in my own life at the time and in the architectural practice. I'd like to read this quote from Wikipedia. We have to be from Wikipedia. Technological convergence refers to the trend where some technologies have distinct functionalities evolve to technologies that overlap, i.e. multiple products come together to form one product with the advantages of each initial component. Technological convergence can also refer to the phenomenon of a group of technologies developed for one use being utilized in many different contexts. The concept of convergence that was happening in my own life, this concept of convergence in technology is also happening as we see it in culture. It's happening in our cuisines and our communication and our media devices. And it's all mostly attributed to the internet. But we saw the impact of that in our own offices with attempts to outsource drafting overseas, even once I arrived in Los Angeles. But now we can see that everyday culture is catching up with technological convergence. The way we communicate now, the way we do business is dramatically changing. The question I started to ask was, what does this mean for architecture? And as I saw it, architecture is at the end of a sustained policy, a disengagement with the contemporary economic, political, and cultural discourse. I think we're all familiar now with repeated bemoaning of insufficient budgets, that as architects, we try to realize our brilliant masterpieces of design. Instead of tackling actually budget issues and capital management as part of a design problem, we've used the client as the entity to assign all blame and lack of foresight as a roadblock to our visions, instead of acknowledging and engaging the dynamics of interpersonal politics as a matter of course. We have let entire industries grow out of our risk-averse tendencies in the form of construction management, project management, instead of reclaiming the territory that we are best trained to perform. Why we do this ourselves, historically, is we architects are traditionally masters of the arts and science, the polymaths. They're arbiters of culture, of style, of grace, and all-around multidisciplinary geniuses, Borromini, Michelangelo, Vitruvius, Da Vinci, Americans, Thomas Jefferson, Frank Lloyd Wright. We should be critical in culture to continuing this quest toward advancement of mankind. We should also add that the long-awaited influence of womankind into the mix. This issue is critical as modern-day architects have become themselves irrelevant in the large scope of things. Even some star architects have been marginalized into brands. Very few are imparting shifts in cultural change, as we should be. Even the term architect and architecture has been appropriated for other technologies. It's been employed for uses unrelated to what we do. The term architect used to be the embodiment of many different things: thinker, philosopher, artisan, engineer, and mathematician. But even as Christopher Hawthorne recently pointed out, Karl Rove can be an architect as well. So I think architects must become relevant again. This will only happen by reimagining our role, reinventing what we do and what we take on, reclaiming our position with the economy, refreshing our image. We need to reboot our architecture and our role in it to recapturing the master builder. And how do we do this? As I'm going to show in different projects, I think we need to diversify. I think we need to take on more. We need to claim ownership of a larger piece of the pie. We're getting smaller and smaller as we are in this diagram. We need to fight specialization. We need to find new applications for design to reach new markets. Allow ourselves to change. The new policy of engagement is not a novel idea, but it's rather a reclamation of the historical position that architects have been privileged to occupy. Because we've done this to ourselves, we need to take the call. Okay, why do I bring this up? Because again, I feel very fortunate for my position in time and space right now. I think we all live in a time when technological convergence is becoming truly influential to how we live, how we work, how we play, how we retreat and commune in life. It's our basic life tenets, and this is what we're doing a lot in my design studio right now. It's not just technical. As I said, it's cultural, economic, entertainment. Global convergence that is altering the way we all live. I think it's frightening, and I honestly think it's exciting at the same time. So this all leads us to Lettuce. Lettuce was started a little over 3 years ago in early 2004. Coming to LA and being involved in the architectural community, I felt like I was joining an environment of really motivated and entrepreneurial people. And it might be just because of Hollywood, but youth is an asset here. And it resulted for us in a very, very can-do place. So we started Lettuce Office with this motivation. And I know that if you haven't heard the story already, I should probably tell you now why we're called Lettuce. And no, we're not. Let us, okay? Let's just get that over with. And I gotta say, that's like the first thing the clients come to us always. They're like, oh, I get it. Let us. No. So we move on. But I have to say, it's not about the vegetable. It's just a word. That's all it is. It's short and sweet, and we named it that way in the spirit of the way a band picks a name. For us, bands can have very abstract names. No one questions why you would name a band like Red Hot Chili Peppers or U2, so why can we not just be Lettuce? We wanted to form our band in the interest of collaboration. We are a group of people with different talents and that we come together for a common interest, and we make music. We make things. We're only stronger because we have each other. It's a convergence of sorts, and we're not alone in this idea. I think you look at recent trends, and the kind of single entity is really not existing as we know it before. Well, I believe the StarConnect model is really proving unsustainable. This is a little diagram we made in our office. Because we're deciding to embrace a different model. This is like, as we see it, the kind of classical master builder model where it's a group of people that come to something, they come to the man, the one person. What does that happen? That information, the guy with the red tie, it gets distributed to maybe a couple guys. I say guys. And what does that happen? It goes to a team, and the team works toward the one product. This is kind of common model of from one above. We're trying to do something very different. This is Lettuce. We're a collective group, and we're trying to start out with each our own set of values, our own set of issues that we bring to the table. Along the way, some things die. Along the way, new issues, new people arise. And in the end, with what we go through as our process, this all arrives toward our product and our building. We, in a way, are calling this like the wiki model. Because even like this lecture itself, it followed somewhat of a wiki model. The wiki model online is where there's multiple contributors to a single entity, a single thing. But even in something as mundane in the office as like a client email, I'll draft it, I'll pass it over to Chet. Chet will add a few words, rewrite some things, pass it over to Michael. Michael will write a few things, and then we'll hit send. We're collectively working together to make the best. And this is at the core of the wiki's brilliance. Singular authorship is dead to us. How does this apply to Lettuce? Well, let me read this piece from Daniel Pink, which has been very influential to us. Many people in business are very uncomfortable crossing into different domains. Their expertise is so great in one area that they feel like amateurs in other domains, and they therefore avoid them. But that approach no longer works. It's multi-world. The rewards go to the multidisciplinary, the multilingual, the multifaceted. From its inception, we've always been interested in that process that I showed you in that last slide. It's been a founding principle for us. It's the pursuit. It's learning. It's the relationships. Those are what make you, you. And that's what makes finally that end product. It's recognition that we are a salesperson. We provide a service. Your customer, your client, has to buy into the fact that what they want in this relationship is with you, a relationship with you. So how do we do this? Through not shutting off options. We actually started, when we started Lettuce, we kind of went to a brainstorm situation where we knew we had to do this. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? We started with a long list of interests. If Lettuce couldn't be an outlet for all of these interests, then why should we do it? So this was actually part of the narrowed down list of what we wanted to accomplish when we first started Lettuce. Architecture, urbans, graphics, interactive, publishing, fashion, film, furniture, product, logistics, and interiors. Oh, okay. So finally we said, you know, right then there were just two of us, didn't have a lot of money, had a lot of excitement. We narrowed it down. Let's just call it space, object, film. Everything that we want to do, we can start to fit into those categories. Further on, as we've developed over the last few years, you're starting to see additional things. It branches out and becomes different. Residential, tenant improvement, interiors, furniture, product, shorts. Again, it gets to a point where we're like, okay, we're losing our focus. We need to come back and decide and converge into something else. And this is where we are presently. We're kind of in this space object media realm. And these are the types of projects that we're working on right now that make up this collection. Residential, tenant improvement, post-production, those have all kind of always stayed the same. We're getting more into the millwork, furniture, and product. And then obviously the film has now come into media. We're doing print, environmental, identity, digital, and film, which I'll show you in a little bit. I've always been fascinated by designing almost new of anything. I've always said that I could design a new strip mall. I could design a new library, a new post office. I would actually love to work for the government. But each project that we do and we add to this list, it adds to our collective intelligence. And they would all allow for a reinterpretation of program, as you'll see next. There's always a structural question then, of not only of how we structure our office, but then how do we structure everything in our pursuits, and ultimately how would we structure our lecture. Actually, when I look at my life, I have Lettuce, I have USC, I have my research, my personal interests, and I have my life and my free time. And sometimes they all overlap, and sometimes I have more of one and less of the other. But I have to say the separations don't exist anymore. So what should connect and organize all of these different disparate things? Well, all things are about convergence. So how do we design something that handles all of these different multiple sources of information? What's the thread or the device can we use? If this were a blog, there's already a format outlined. If this were a lecture, it could be a tag cloud, and this is actually, you guys are familiar with a tag cloud? It's a visual representation of information as far as takes a collection of data, metadata, and puts it and increases font size and font color for things. And so this was actually an early version of my lecture that I ran through a tag cloud to see what would pop out, to tell me a little bit more about what I was thinking and what I was writing about. But this is live, our experience here tonight, so I have to tell you a story. And the story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even if I try so hard to fight it. So I'm going to make connections through projects via a thread of processes and other overlaps. Lettuce is a process, and our life, like Lettuce, has many overlaps. So I'm going to go into a few. Done residence. I lied before. I'm going to pick up on a project that I ended my lecture with 2 years ago. This was one of the first architectural pursuits that Lettuce had done. And it actually is going to prove that you should do anything and everything. This isn't a project that I typically show, and I don't even know if it's on our website right now. You'll see why in a second. We actually were just beginning our design firm, and we were in that like take every job you can attitude. And we were in it for different reasons, financial. This one came along, and basically the client for this, they wanted a new house, and they told us they wanted Cape Cod. It's not the preferred mode that we designed today, but we kind of thought, why not? And I don't think you can kind of raise your nose at these things that don't live up to your standards in design. Not today, because part of convergence in today's culture is being nimble. So these were our early studies. We're like, if we're going to do Cape Cod, we're going to do it right. We're going to figure out exactly the forms, the relationships, the methods of how and why we would have a certain type of roof, what percentage of that type of roof is actually done in Cape Cod, and how do we now translate this to being built now, today. These were in more additional studies. We learned that we tried different things out and learned that, it didn't work for design and also didn't work for Cape Cod. But in the end, this is where we're getting to new. The project was completed roughly a year and a half ago. this project personally, it had a true blend of East Coast style, Midwest American picket fence idealism, and West Coast why the heck not attitude. So I actually feel very proud of completing this project. And I feel that when you actually see this, it could be something that you would experience no matter where you are in the U.S. This has those qualities that evokes it back to Cape Cod. It was a wonderful process of research and learning. And how could you not love that? I mean, come on. Got the American flag and everything? Come on. So in the spirit of convergence, I'm going to fast forward past everything in the middle, actually, and I'm going to show you our newest ground-up residence that's still in design. We haven't actually found a kind of title for it yet. We call it internally the Dundee residence because of the street. Here, it's the area. This is right now in design development. But this project, it's really about programming, data, and use analysis. It's about environmental priorities usurping form-making in our office. This is also the first project that we were working on from the beginning stages with Chet, and he's very integral to this project. And to us, is this a part of our process? But I have to say, it's not a bad wait to wait 2.5 years and traverse about 200 years of architecture into this project to do what you want. So let me walk you through a few of our studies for this project. This is this site. Actually, it's right there. It's in the Los Feliz Hills. This is the Griffith Park Observatory here on the side. Here we have the kind of edge and bound of the residence against the park itself. And showing it, obviously, because of the orientation of the landscape, it has this view of the Griffith Observatory. This is at the same orientation you can start to see North Bean up. And that's our buildable site area. And there's also unique conditions of this because of this project being here within the valley. The valley has that outward edge going out to Griffith Park, but there's obvious concerns that we started to have because of the number of trees that you see on the project for the amount of sun that would hit there. And this was important to our client, it's important to us. The environmental concerns right away were something that we could not dismiss. So we went through a series of sun studies and sun shadows. We were looking here at winter solace. And this is taking things through Rhino, casting it in 3D, and casting shadows, and looking at from the various times of day, what do our shadows look like across the site as best we can. We're accumulating data, as much data as we can with the tools available to us, to start to understand this site, to just really start to understand how one might live best in this site. And we do this for not only every point in time of the year, but we're doing this specific to the site at various elevations. Each one of the 0, 10, 20, 30, because the height of this house is actually going to be almost 3 stories. All of this is leading where on the site can we take advantage of what we wanted to in relationship to the program and to the client's wishes. We also start and do mini versions of, this is a grown-up kind of bubble diagram. And this house, I have to say, we really were investigating via programming. We're asking questions of what does it mean to make a house that is decidedly for the future? Because we're planning here for yet unborn children. We're planning here for a life that is to come in the next decade. So we're looking, all of these colors are looking at different users of the house, users now, users in the future. And how do we start to look at adjacencies that happen? We ask a lot of questions. We ask for a lot of facts of how we can get into this. And then from each of these users, we're looking at for how the patterns start to exist, for how they use this new house. We're also doing other ways of looking at the program to start to see how spatial relationships and adjacency. So this is taking every list of the program space, assigning its own symbol, and looking out at what is more concentrated with adjacencies to other pieces of program. On the left is probably the umpty-ninth bubble diagram, and it was actually one of them that came out because of these adjacencies. New clusters of programs started to emerge that we hadn't expected. And also, likewise, then new connections across some pieces of program. I think that was actually a master bath in the kitchen and a playroom that we didn't expect. This is information that we would not have gathered with using these tools and deploying. This is not things that came out of the client's mouth. Only from overlapping this information, overlapping this data, do we start to understand now how it might best use. Another story of then assigning the user time to space. So reinterpreting this information and data. If you take all of those projected users and you assign it back into the program, we start to see all of a sudden this influx and concentration on program spaces that we didn't expect. Again, we're looking at convergence of program, user, and site study as we move into the next phase. So this was actually a diagram similar to a lot of what's going on in my studio right now. It's starting to, again, look at our different users, what's going to happen in their life, and the dot is in the future projection. Mapping them across the course of the day for a typical day at work, a typical day in the weekend. And how do we start to see now the program patterns that exist? Where do we start to see our concentrations? We have to ask ourselves then, how do we reinterpret this list here to start to work with our adjacencies that we discovered in that first bubble diagram. But this house is decidedly not an exercise in form. But as you can see, that it's an obsession with metadata. It's not about what data will tell you, it's about what the data of the data reveals. So we carefully combined that environmental studies of the first part with the programming and the user data that you just saw. And only then did we start to address form. So those those clusters that you started to see of different ways of looking at the program start to now come together into actual solid form and program. It was a careful assimilation or convergence of data to solve this problem. And only after that do we start to decide what it will look like on the outside. So all of these models that we're starting to do in our office are having this, has the same basic tenets, the same basic program, the same program adjacency, the same program relationships, all to capitalize on the environmental concerns. And now we go into an exercise of starting to explore a language for the building, of still keeping in mind our previous decisions and data, the envelope, the masking, the skin, to reach where we're at literally right now in our studio as we move into design development, of eventually looking at how screening and openings are going to be determined by the early analysis. From this, I'm going to jump now straight back to USC. And I actually want to talk about the USC faculty exhibit. It's a project that probably some of you may remember and have seen in May, is it May? It was May of this last year, or of this year. As chair of the Lectures and Exhibit Committee, I was assigned and charged with designing the exhibition of faculty work for the accreditation visit when they came. We decided to take this on in our office as a design problem, but the execution of the design and the construction, I must mention, it was done by all the faculty who contributed to their boards. It was a true convergence of the faculty. And it was a small group of wonderful faculty and students that actually put it together. As an office, though, we are interested in design that operates on more than one level. The design must satisfy aesthetics, it must look beautiful, it must satisfy function, it must accomplish its task, but we also have this fascination with the metadata, as you've seen in our other projects. It must edify and explicate another phenomenon. So we took on this idea of the faculty topography. How do we start to take this very diverse set of people, and how do we make something that physically shows their own body of work in a way that they are satisfied with and would want to be shown, but tells us another layer of information about the landscape of the faculty? So by designing this, we designed a faculty topography where each faculty member was given a 2x2 square, as you saw on the wall, and they could do whatever they wanted with it. And we all had debates about what should be on this board and how do we design that board, but everyone did it. And we pulled this together and created this system on boxes. You see it's explained right there, but I'd rather just show you it in person. The little squares, they each, in the front here, they actually each represent the person on the wall. So here you actually have a little avatar for your box on the wall. That's how you understand it. And that puts the name to the surface. But each one of these boxes, the metadata that became evident was the height off the wall, was the age and the amount of time that person had been at USC. It's a subtle thing. I'm not sure that maybe some of you didn't even notice. You're just like, what's this crazy landscape that's here on the wall? But this is a different example of how we have to embrace the data and make it something real, something tactile, something visible, part of our environment. It's an opportunity to make data visual and to thus create this topography. From that, I'd like to move actually into some of the graphics works that we've done recently. We did a project for, sorry, UCLA. Don't mean to mention that here. But it was the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And this is actually a pro bono project that we did last year. And it's been, I think it is tough as a small business to do this kind of pro bono work. But it's something that we've decided as a business that we always want to try to do, even if it's tiny, as you'll see in this. But I hope you understand in this project that you can see that design has an impact and can help save lives, literally. Idealist still lives on. We're using design to serve a larger cause, because designing is not always to make things pretty, but it's truly to participate in directly helping people. So the task at hand, the general problem was, we had to address the problem that someone came to us with. No matter how many good drugs you have out there, no matter how many new drugs are on the market, no matter how well they're dispensed, or no matter how well they're prescribed, the illnesses are noticed and prescribed, there's still the problem that if people don't know how to recognize the drug, don't understand how to take the drug, don't understand how to read instructions, then no good comes of it at all. This is actually a large problem that we have here in California and around the world. And it's primarily because of the large component of non-English speaking residents and patients, and this was specifically for the LA County hospital system. So our task was to design a worksheet that could be issued with the drug treatments upon exiting a hospital from a hospital stay. And it became a problem of sign iconography and how can design communicate. And I have to say, like, this was our first initial studies, this very top row. As we went into this, we produced these. We're trying to convey information of when do you take the pill, how do you take the pill, okay? And we showed this to the person we were working with at UCLA, Dr. Cordasco, and she looked at us and she's like, okay, breakfast, it's not always good for steak and eggs to happen to a heart patient, you know? Like, oh, yeah, okay. It also isn't good to associate breakfast, steak, and eggs with someone who may be from a different country and doesn't have those associations. So we quickly learned that we have to use other symbols and other tools to communicate these things. These were other studies that we did. And it all worked toward eventually making this medication worksheet. And this was a PDF worksheet that they were able to actually work into their system. And as someone would check out, they're handed a kind of list of their prescriptions and a list of everything that they need to start to do. And this is something that worked with the LA County hospitals, could be printed out in their existing outprint and printer. The doctor enters from their computer in their normal checkout procedures what medications they take, how many pills they have to take, when they have to take it in the morning, and it's translated into this device with an actual picture of the pill, because who can read the names on those pill bottles? Can't. So you'll get your actual picture on a pill. If you take 2 in the morning, have to eat it with food, it gets translated out into something that doesn't rely on the written word for someone to understand. This was actually one of our first Lettuce graphic projects, and we'd done these things in-house. So I'd like to show you through our next problem. It's just stuff that we've been playing around within the office, and it was on our own identity. There's been this kind of graphic evolution of what is lettuce, okay? And maybe we kind of got, first we were onto the green, and then we're like off of the green or whatnot. But our logo and our identity has been under like constant revision since our inception. And I think it's between Michael and I, we've probably had like a dozen different styles actually of business cards. And this was our second or third one. I think actually Julia Mikulski helped with this one. We're always into the every person gets a different color and you have to show your identity. And this is probably a model that any business student would say is not the best thing to do. And we strongly feel, though, this is part of our evolutionary project, and we need to be able to adapt and change. We are not beholden to the one thing that stands for who we are. It's not like we're GM, and 20 years from now, you're going to need to recognize our symbol. So we hope you recognize our latest work, and you understand our latest identity as part of the package. And I just wanted to show this is, as you saw before, this is where we're at right now. This was something that corresponded over the summer, I believe, and it was a major overhaul of our entire identity package, including a website, which I'll show you briefly later. But in brief, we wanted this current generation to address 2 phenomenons. One, we just got enamored with the notion of tape and folds, as you saw in the animation, folding and mutating. But then there was establishment of a media branch of Lettuce that also corresponded this summer. So we wanted to activate and animate our logo as part of how we conceive the design. And this project also cemented our new graphics director, Claire Kang, who is an old collaborator with Michael and I from Yale. She's presently based in Tokyo. But we've actually collaborated with her a number of times. So this is the real formal marking of her as a part of Lattice. And plus, the folding idea is definitely part of Japanese influence. But this is convergence. This is technological convergence that now allows for this type and this ease of communication and this to work as a business model. We're actually excited that it's working and we're productive in this aspect of our business. This was our final letterhead and logo. But, you see it now. Who knows how long we're actually going to keep that. Until the paper runs out. That's our next chance, or our next sign that we have to redesign. All small press printing. So from graphics, there's also an overlap into a recent project that we've done, Sandwich Shop. This was actually, it's on 6th and Hill in downtown. And it's actually perfectly situated between a Famima and Starbucks. I love that. But it was this little store called La Baguette. And actually, I have to say, they're going to be bringing sandwiches for our lecture reception tonight. So, new business, try the sandwiches, go buy a sandwich. 6th and Grand, I say 5th? Sorry, 6th and Grand. That's important. But our client came to us, and he's actually an accountant by trade. And he came to us, and he's like, I just got to do this. I got to have the sandwich shop. He actually wanted to call it Witches 213 at the time. We were like, I don't know. So part of our business, or part of our job, was to rename him, too. But he came to us, and he was so enamored now. He had gone to culinary school and was going to completely change his career, as we're allowed to now do, or capable of doing so easily. And he's starting this shop. It's his new venture, his new quest into the business world. We automatically connected, and we particularly connected because he had this idea about his new sandwich shop as being something very generic. Generic in the form of being specific. It's anti-branding that you can brand. Think of the Muji is in the same mode. But this was graphics, environments, something that we can make stuff. It's food. We did it. He started talking to us about generic brands. Do you all remember these? Ralph's had this kind of generic brand in the 80s. Okay, you guys might not even remember this. Oh, but cola. This is what he had. So this idea of no brand, even though it is a brand itself, but it's low cost. He actually talked to us about this TV show where there was actually a generic university. I think we can all appreciate that from coming out of private institutions. The project itself is actually so small. It's actually so minimal. The budget is so small and so minimal that we had to just do what we could for this person, and we had to kind of take this on. So it's not even worth talking about it architecturally even. This is a graphics and an environment identity problem for us. The things that we did, we built he needed display. He wants to sell chips, got to make money. So we built display around the existing kind of countertop. We built a new piece to kind of incorporate a drink machine that goes right there, hide the trash, be a new storefront, a new signage for people that are walking back and forth and not able to see always within and in studio. And it became about graphics. These are elevation studies that we looked at like, okay, he's doing these new organic sandwiches. How do we express that into space without doing anything, really? We did studies like this, and then we determined that it probably wasn't the best thing to do to make it too farm-friendly. Started to look just into the product itself, and how do we start to make things that connote the products that are part of what he's selling. That is the system itself. And lastly, because of budget and because of our interest, we looked at how we could develop that into something that we could start to apply into the space. So we ended up doing our own version of graphic design, which was laser cutting these templates. We did this all in a laser cutter through probably Plot Pro or something, breaking it down, Photoshop elements to start to get and take, this was, what is that, peppers and lettuce? Yeah, it's hard to tell. And break it down into the components. This is something we could use technology to use the computer to do in a very easy way, and then we could actually apply ourselves in a very easy way. We're appropriating stencil art here, which is coming out of street art. And actually, Russell in our office is very skilled in this technique. And so, although it made us wonder about what he's doing in his off time, we decided to go with it here and put it in this space. This is actually a rendering of all of the iterations. And there was some furniture, and this is not quite like the furniture we ended up getting. But a very small project, but it quickly moved then into graphics. We had to make the entire experience part of it. These were early studies. We had a little thing where Earl of Sand. Sandwich, you got it? Yeah. Kind of looked like he had the After 5 shadow there, so that didn't go very far with the client. But looking at how we can take, these are all concept designs for stickers, of how can we take ease of production, small mode of information, and start to apply it to the product, and have different ways that we can start to associate it with it. This is actually the scheme of logos that we went with for the project. And I have to say, we liked it because it was so simple. I mean, the logo alone, it's a sandwich. It's the logo with 2 bars. Got it? Generic. And then as you go through, as you decide what you want in your sandwich, you pick lettuce, tomato. These become stickers that go and they cue through his system of how the person who makes it translates to the person who puts it on the register. And all of this is going into an identity package for him that's under the works right now, using common paper bags. How do we start to just take one more step into this kind of generic branding, and how do we start to carry it through in his product? Now, the budget was so small on this project that when we got bids back, it didn't work. So we did it ourselves. We actually built the whole thing over Labor Day. We thought it was, pretty appropriate that we work on Labor Day weekend. And it took us into the late night, a few nights, as it didn't quite get done on schedule, so now we can't really blame them ourselves. But I have to say, this one's from my mom. It has to show that an Ivy League education will still have you washing floors and prepping. And it was hot. This was that really hot weekend we had back then. Oh. But we had a lot of fun, actually. This is us putting on the stencils on the wall, applying the super graphics at late night. These are the shelves that we actually built ourselves in a place I can't mention. And we constructed on site, and finished on site, and installed on site. And it fell over on the sidewalk, and we had to fix it on site. The client came running across the street. Ah! It's fine, we'll figure it out. It all worked out. But in the end, we're very much interested in how we can make a small move with environmental graphics to make a big statement. And thankfully, he's doing very well as a business now, and we're very happy about that. So this all gets into the fact that we like to make stuff, as you, I hope, have seen. So I wanted to just briefly show you the furniture, which has been before lettuce, before anything. We've always been into doing furniture projects. The main point about this is I think you have to learn by doing, and that's why it's very important to us all to make things and to do things in our practice. We'd never designed a full line of furniture before. We were thankful to have a showroom that came to us and wanted us to display it. And we took one piece, one idea, and turned it into a large project. There was the lap surface because it has this kind of movable piece that can go on the side or go on an ottoman. There's also the Surface series was a table series and had a kind of corresponding bureau. And this we were really into color at the time, and there's color that's embedded on the underside. And there's this beautiful array of color that comes out these white painted nude materials. You'll see it right there. So that's actually all white on the inside, but the bright color emanates inside of it. But we really feel like this is exercising your design muscles. You gotta do it. You gotta get out there and you have to make these things. And this is actually outside of the shop. When we had to take pictures, we're like, why not? Kind of liked it. We're also into making furniture for clients. This was one that came from a commission. And I have to actually say we call this the Stash series because it's a series of dresser, bed, nightstand, which you'll see in a second. And it's all about getting as much storage. These are all pull-out things underneath the platform bed because you can't buy a platform bed with storage. I don't know why. That's what started this. But then there's also actually a lot of hidden spaces. So this space in the front has a corresponding side piece that comes out. It's the Stash series because he had to hide some stuff. And everywhere within this unit, there's hidden spaces. Behind here, one of the base pieces pops out. It was a really fun thing to start to do for our office. So I'm going to go through just a few more projects. This one being a kind of completely different exercise of our brain muscles. And in this, we had to realize, for Skyview residents, that it's okay not to have a signature for how we design. It's okay to honor another designer's language. It's okay to respectfully deviate from another designer's project. This is actually a project, it's done by Boyd Georgie, who is actually another USC graduate in the 60s. This was his home and studio, and our client is an art historian from Occidental that came to us. And they have a lot of plans for the house. This is probably a two-phase project, and we just completed phase 1. This is in the interior, these wonderful crafted details going from the exterior courtyard to the interior courtyard. This house, it's fascinating. It was shot all by Julius Schulman. We have original Julian Schulman photographs. We have original drawings from Boyd Georgie. They came to us and were just, oh, this is like what we love. We got into this a lot. It was a completely different part of our brain that we had to start using for this, because how do we now start to take this project that had been so well documented and in different periodicals and whatnot. This is actually Boyd Georgie's family, his little boy who's alive and gave us the drawings. I think this is his first wife sitting there. But these are actually original drawings for the house itself. This was a later addition, and this is where we've done our work right now that we didn't have the drawings for, but we have his hand sketch of how he was thinking about it and how it evolved. And this is actually the Julius Schulman photograph of that exterior deck. And it didn't exist like that when we got to the project. It looked like this. Oh, I know. Didn't it just kill you? So, this was making us feel righteous. We had to do this. This was empowering. But we had to respect what we needed to return. How do we return it to that? Whoops, I just skipped one. How do we return it to that, faced with new building codes that make much larger members? We can't make the connections anymore. Constant struggle for how do we respect the old, how do we make the new? And not only that, is the owner had different needs and different desires. So we actually, on the interior, that's the way it was. That's Boyd. And this is what it is now today. This is my own shots from, still in construction actually. The owner had new requirements. If you can see here, we actually installed a spa in a new spa courtyard and whatnot right outside. It's a wonderful amenity. They wanted to look at it. They're like, why can't we feel like this is a part? So we had to kind of break the language of that building. We had to puncture it. We had to do something that Boyd Georgie would never, ever do to this project. And so, this is what we're talking about and debating within the office and actually debating with the client quite a bit of how do we make this language. So in the system of that, instead of making a puncture, because that would be completely wrong for this monolithic wall that runs through the house, we made a slice. As you can start to see on the interior, everywhere else it was treated with a new material. And this is in construction on the outside. What it looks to, this is a sliding new platform that rolls away, and there's a stainless steel tub on the other side. But how do we now reinterpret and remake what we're going to do? We have to learn a language. We have to honor and dishonor where appropriate. Think before you follow precedents. That's what I'd like to have you get from that. So we also like to navel gaze. You guys know what that means? We like to analyze ourselves. We like to analyze everyone else, so why not get to analyze ourselves? We think navel gazing is good. If we don't ponder and if we don't look back at our own work and our processes, how are we supposed to learn from them? So we would otherwise have little criteria to prioritize our efforts. So we've done some studies in the office. This is actually a list of projects since we started QuickBooks. So that's all the data we have. It's probably, 2 years ago or so. And we just calculated, and we wanted to see how many man hours does it take to do these projects. So the amazing thing was, like this largest project, this is actually the buffer house. This is one that's not even been built yet. You don't know how that equates to fee. And we've already spent, almost roughly 1,100 hours on it. Soapbox 2, which is one of the last projects I'm going to show you here. Not a huge fee, commercial job, also up in the big. And then Skyview, which is that very, very small project, which I just showed you. Where is it on there? Toward the bottom. Like, if I tell you the fee for that project, it should be back over here. But no, big projects take or small projects take a lot of time too. But this is part of understanding ourselves, looking at ourselves as a business, and how do we start to now use this as estimating what's going to happen to us in the future. We also, recently, Greer helped us out with this one. We wanted to look at how are we individually, how do we make this collective? So if we took all of our projects chronologically from start date, from what you saw before, each of these stripes is how much time that project took in relationship to the others. We started to map out by who's been involved in what projects to start to understand how do we work. Okay, I think I'm on the top, Michael's on the bottom, Chet joined us back here, other project designers, interns who are kind of always there along the way. And this is actually these were 2 designers we had 2 years ago, and then we just started data when they left. So they got a blip. But all of these things help to talk to us about how we work together and what are our strengths and what are we doing. Because I think there's really a value in self-contemplation. We're looking at this as a business. We're looking through different methods of comparison and analysis. And we also did this recently via our next project. This was redesigning our Lettuce website. And I'm just going to show you one clip from this. Because the same things that I talked about when how do you structure a talk came up with how do you then start to structure your information on a website. As you can know, like our clients are always, okay, they don't understand our name. That's the first thing. It's the whole Lettuce, right? But then they're like, what do you do? Okay, I see spaces, objects, film. What do you actually do? And so they'd have to go through our old website through this series of layered information. And through talking to them, we realized we have to find a way that our system, the way that these things assimilate from one web string becomes evident among first visit. So this is an experiment. I think it's beta live right now on our site. But breaking down our structure of an office in a very visual way such that people can start to understand. And in its true form, when it gets there, hopefully soon, you'll be able to click on any project, and at the same time, if it has overlaps with any other core part of our firm and graphics and environment, those will come highlighted as well as you scroll down, all the people that were involved in that project will show. So using the web as one interface that we can talk about how this collaborative actually works in practice. So check that out, hopefully soon. Speaking of organizing data, we found that there's a new market for us in the climate on doing just that. We've recently started doing a number of feasibility studies for clients because we like all kinds of problem solving, as we've shown. And we don't think code should be a chore, city code, that is. We don't think zoning is boring. I actually think it has a lot of possibilities and can be quite beautiful. And I think a lot of this is coming out of the recent market that we're getting more interested in this in our firm. Someone will come to us with a site. This is a site on Melrose. It's a current auto parts repair place. It's been that way for 30 years. Got passed to the sun. It's obviously in a good area. What do I do with it? The client has no idea. How do they start to tackle this problem? That's where we, as architects and designers, can start to fill in this role and explain this process to our clients. So this was the early studies that we did. There's the 300 parking ring that we have to have. All other types of parking that's available becomes a big aspect. Looking at different types and uses within the neighborhood. This is the stuff that we do right here in studio, but this is actually getting very valuable to our clients. And finally, this was how we explained our process to end up coming to our client back with, we'd said there were 4 preferred schemes based on their first criteria, based on more than 1,000 actual different opportunities because of code and data that you could do. But we were trying to describe to him our thought process about how we took that information, how we started to divide it out, and how we eventually would come to recommend a certain set of schemes, a certain value to him. So I'm going to switch from this data for being a potential for a project to 2 space projects that would close the lecture. One of which was the Buffer House. This is the one that Dean Ma mentioned that he hadn't seen, so I'm glad I get to finally show it to him. But this house is a precursor to many ideas in Done. This is also the house that took the biggest, longest bar and isn't even built yet. Starting soon. But in this house, form, again, was not a priority. It was decidedly an interiors-driven project. So we have a unique site in West LA, here on this corner condition. And actually, our client, she works right here. Okay? Her boss lives right there. He gave her this site. Why she'd want to do this, I don't know, but this is her game. It's actually, it's a gallery owner, and she's runs his entire business out of this small studio house right here, and he gave her this project. But the interesting thing about this, again, site is a major concern with how we started to look at our approach toward this design. And we call this the Buffer House because our client's paranoid, literally. She thinks that there's all these crazies and people are going to kill her out on the streets here. And it was always about, I got to have my privacy. She's living next to her boss, and she's living next to where she works, and she's all about her privacy. But it all became about how do we start to create this buffer through different layers of the project. And also then capitalizing on the fact that these are really her backyards too. The owner of the gallery grows organic vegetables, and their dogs play in here. And in the end, that project does open up to the rest of the site off of this. So how do we start to make a form that does that? This is the back elevation of the house. The top of it, where the kind of private spaces are, it comes around and curves and bends and folds out into the neighborhood or the neighboring properties. There's also a courtyard, which interjects inside of it. You see with a toldo that's running across for environmental concerns of daylight and sunlight, deep punctures. And then the outside of the house, it was recently called in a press article a chia pet. Kind of looks like a chia pet, because it has the green screen product that we're going to be wrapping the entire house in, creating another layer for that buffer. It literally goes over and across the windows. So at times, it's the green that's enveloping the occupants and creating that layer. Other times, it's the glass. Other times, it's different materials. But that, over probably a 2-year process, will come back to be this. Again, no windows on the outside. It's for privacy. These are some diagrams that we did in-house showing this kind of outer layer, this skin layer that's made of those different components, and how it starts to work. Anytime we punctured that layer, we had to have a new material come in, a new attitude for how we make these kind of incisions within this house. And then doing diagrams, because the service area, she had to have so much storage, you wouldn't believe. I still don't know what she's going to put in all of this, but it was all about how do the service and the storage components make up and not detract from the true openness of the house. And I have to say, this was, as mentioned, we were really proud to get a Spark Design Award. And Spark Awards are a new international firm award for having interdisciplinary projects. So not only was there an architecture, we were proud to receive that, there's graphic designers, there's product designers, that's our people. So again, we're seeing convergence and overlaps. In my last project, I wanted to come around and show you soapbox films. And I want to say we're coming full circle with soapbox, because actually soapbox was one of our very first projects. This was soapbox 3 years ago. This is what we did from them. It was 2 guys, 500 square feet, and $5,000. So we shopped at IKEA. And we made a little bit of custom stuff, and more IKEA, and put some floor panels, and this was their space, and they loved it. Business went great. 2 years later, they come back. It's 15 guys. They bought a $5,000 square foot building. They have $500,000 to start, and they graciously asked us to design their next space. And okay, I'll do it. Amazing growth model, though. So how did we start to now? We've worked with these people before. So how do we start to look at how we can bring something to the table? They are a post-production facility. They finish different films. They are their own creative agency. They make films and whatnot. And it's headed by Chris Allender, who's younger than me. And there's no bitterness in that. And we started to look at, like, how does he organize his company? Like, he had gone through this amazing growth spurt from 2 people to 15 and even more. This is planning for upwards of 25. So how do we start to design for something? How is this evolving company that we can't even really start to quantify? So we actually asked him who his idols were. That was one of our first conversations. And he has, he very much cares for Walt Disney, Robert Rodriguez, and James Cameron. And without going into why those people were important to him, we looked at this as a clue into why and what he's wanting this company to become and where this company is headed. And so by close analysis of each of those people and their biographies and how they run their businesses, and then ultimately we're making design models. How do we model those other forms of leadership and growth? This is the kind of Walt Disney, one man conquers all. This is Robert Rodriguez. We laid these out as information to him and then related to how we were starting to design his business, his space. And immediately, what he could translate from knowing about a person became something physical or 2D physical in front of him. And he could react to that and be like, oh, okay, I like him for this other motive, but I don't like him for how this would work in my space. And we had an amazing conversation about how we could start to then rethink and what was the correct model for designing for him. And we're doing more research. We did tons of, this is the other one of those big bars just because we were having so much fun. Looking at different aspects of the program, different qualities of space, trying to convince a client who first come to us and says, I need closed offices, I need roofs, I need locking doors. Like, why do you really need that? What's really is the type of enclosure they would require? So trying to model out for him, look, I think we could say that admin and producers and Chris and Dave, you don't really need that door, do you? You really don't really need that sound lock all around you. And able to talk about these sort of adjacency and eventually convince him to do a different model of how you do your business, or how he's going to have his space. Important, it's only 5,000 square feet, so a lot of the kind of design energy, as well as getting private offices and having this kind of open bank for interns and as projects develop, we had to look at how we have then enclosure based on that environmental model of how he wanted to structure his business. And he actually said it was very important to see these people. You know, they're used to working in very close quarters, and to go to this much larger space, they're like, what's it going to be like when I can't look across the room and say, I need you to do this. Come over here. You know, work on this for me. So in designing the two membrane walls, as we call them, on both sides of the space, for one, we didn't want this thing to look like door, 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 door. That's not what he's about. He's about connectivity between everyone. So we started to look at how visual view paths from the entry, from the individual offices, would overlap and start to design then the membrane wall. This is a section looking at then just this different overlay materials that make up the membrane wall. Now this project, this is where it was Tuesday. It's not done yet. It's supposed to be done by now. But it's almost there. I think they're going to have their party in a couple of weeks now. But this is, you can start to see that finally, after like 4 months, the membrane wall is coming to play in the space. And we're starting to see how these things actually happen. The doors are specially designed with a pattern such that, again, it's part of that middle zone of how can we have a little bit of transparency, a little bit of connection to people, even when the door is shut. Because that's actually important to see what other people are working on. So this is just a detail through one of those doors. And I think architecture is also about having fun. This is a facade as was. It's a building that was actually sandwiched in 3 sides. So this was all there was. This was how you address the building every day. You know, we kind of labored over, what does this mean to have this like only facade? That's the whole building, it's a facade. You can't tell how big it is. And we tried to conceptualize about how it would be part of what we were doing in the interior. And we finally just decided to treat it as a kind of folly. It's a kind of fun. Look through different materials and different patterns of how we start to make openings. We actually started to work with some unconventional materials that we're going to use roofing materials. Start to do this one. We went all the way through like 4 stages of mock-ups, and the client just went, I don't know. So we're redesigning literally last week. This is glass block, which we labored over from Italy, and we have to say it's worth it. That filters really into the interior from the exterior. And there's Russell on site on Tuesday looking as they start to now put this new application for the exterior, wrapping that skin, and treat this literally as this is the one facade, which has relations in proportion and in materials into that membrane wall, but is a discrete element of its own. That's actually one of the large roofing mock-ups that we did, which the client rejected in the end, and we couldn't convince them of it, but they still love us. And this is showing that still things change. This is actually was then the new system that we did it this week actually, to try a new material, and it's one of those, we found the material on site in some part of California. Contractor said, I'll go get it if you can make it work. We had to make it work, and in the end, it's still fun. Still love it. Lastly, short project here. Just wanted to conclude projects with the final thing that's in the works, and this is actually, we're working with Soapbox on this. It's a graphics, environment, and set design that we're working for the Disney Channel right now, trying to revamp an existing show, the Movie Surfer show. But now working with Disney, we accept that we have to deal with the man. He was one of those models, early on, and here we are. But engaging mega clients like Disney, it's no longer a form of selling out, as once thought. It's a strategy. We want to make change through engagement, not object and rebellion. At this stage, the design problem was how do you take TiVo techniques? They were trying to think, how can we make something new out of this slow idea of looking at movies via the VCR and take it into a new idea of fast forward, stop, and apply that to a 2D graphic logo. So these logos actually are interactive. This is just the 2D representation of those. But again, we're working on this with Claire in Tokyo. And we came across several schemes, and it's been pitched to Disney. And the above are actually concepts now for the motion graphics. In the end, it'll be tied to an overall digital environment, the graphics, a set design for the new show. I think that's a great example of convergence. So in conclusion, I wanted to address the question of what it means for all of us to practice and design for a converging society. How do we as students, as architects, as designers remain relevant and appropriate? I personally have a few tenets. Number one, I think you have to embrace new technology. This means architectural, digital media. We spent over 10 years fighting this in a personal struggle, and it's not worth it. You can't ever beat it. So join it, participate it, use it, abuse it. Know a base. Don't specialize from the get-go. Experiment, explore. Don't say you can't, won't until you try. Learn to juggle. Keep practicing. This applies to your pursuits, your interests, your family. You can have it all, just not at the same time. And it gets better, and you're going to get more able. 4, find inspiration everywhere. Watch your data, watch yourselves. Make things, cover ground. In the end, we all must recognize that technology, the economy, society are all participating in this phenomenon of convergence. And I think it's imperative that architecture must play a role in addressing, responding, and participating in this contemporary condition. In order to do so, we must embrace ideas that have been less enthusiastically received in recent history. Among those ideas are a multivalent enterprise as a matter of survival, and change is the inevitable force that drives innovation. I've made it my task to research, to identify, and interpret these forces for employment in the larger enterprise of both the school and of the contemporary architectural discourse through Lettuce. And I hope to stay tuned. Thank you very much. This is your email.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Well, you show a lot of effort in design, but what about your marketing strategy? You have not mapped out.
We have not marked out conscious marketing strategies. And part of it was not enough time and just knowing that we're going to be doing what we want to do anyway. And that was kind of a decision on our end. We're not going to put forward the projects that don't exemplify who we are. Now, we have to say that recently, everything had been through referrals. Everything is always through referrals. And we're a little worried that you can't always rely on that. So we're recently starting to make things that start to have our own web presence, working with Angelique. Actually, I see Angelique in the background. She's our brand new PR girl. She's fantastic. And she doesn't do architect. She's art and fashion and media. So we're starting to engage that now. It's something certainly it's a matter of doing.
You mentioned about like the wonders of technology that we should embrace technology, but on the other hand, is there anything we should aware of technology, or is there any chances of backfiring from like embracing too many new technology?
Well, I think if you notice from our work that I'm decidedly, it's been something from our position is we don't embrace technology as a form-making tool. That's something that's very conscious, I think, out of both of our education and something that we have questioned and certainly in the office. But I very much think that technology is something that you have to use still as a tool, as an analytical tool, to get toward things that you wouldn't have expected before. So I personally believe, and I know you could debate this for that it shouldn't be the form-making part of how you make architecture.
What was the hardest part about starting with your own company?
I had no idea how to run a business. I think that that's probably part I feel really strongly about, that when you are in architecture school and you're in a community like this, and I think it's becoming a lot easier now with all of the overlapping of the different disciplines and whatnot, that you have to learn and look at the kind of entire piece of the project, which includes how do you pay your employees, how do you manage your supplies, how do you survive as a matter of course. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I wish I had more of, and I'm working on every day.
I was wondering whether you feel the reliance on process has made your clients complicit, or whether it overwhelms the clients with a
Well, I do have to say, for a large part, the clients still drive our process. Like we will, in those first meetings with the client, they are the kind of inspiration for what we ultimately absorb into our own research and our own studies. I believe it can really scare clients off from what we do. And it's interesting as we go down a relationship with them. There's some that, actually a project I didn't show, Whitty House, where it was all internalized because we would start to broach that with our client and it just didn't go well. You know, client didn't have interest in that. So we still very much want to maintain that relationship with the client, do the best that we can for them, satisfy what they have. But in the end, we're satisfying our own kind of processes as well. Sometimes it's very open, and like in the Skyview House, our client was fully participatory, and even in Soapbox, in what we were doing. But other times, it's a kind of, we have our secrets.
Comes magic.
Yeah, exactly. They read about it later in the press, and then they get scared. The paranoid thing, that came out later. Thank you all very much.